And good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Eden Gordon Hill. Welcome to the All American Book Club. We are here in our nation's capital, a shining city on a hill, as Reagan always said. And we are very much focused on this powerful summer, focused on the patriotism of this beautiful nation, also focused on God, country, and family. And this morning, I am bringing over a very special guest to the show. He is a very dear friend of mine. We've known each other for years. He's from Brooklyn, New York, and he has this brand new book out. He's known by two different names, Craig Syracuse and also Craig Tubiolo. And we are going to be talking with him about his brand new book. You guys, I want to just tell you quickly, and then we're going to bring him over to the show. He is a popular TV host, and he just released the book called All the Green, Discovering God's Plan for Your Life. And let me just say this, he's a veteran television journalist, and he worked with Entertainment Tonight, and he's worked with so many big names. So we're going to break down all of his powerful interviews, and we get to welcome to the show, Craig. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thank you so much. And it's interesting. My wife now wants me to use Tubiolo because of my son, and she wants people to know my proper last name. So I haven't given into it yet, but I'm still going by Syracuse.
I thought I met you as one, and then I realized you use another, and I thought, you know what, I'm just going to say both because
It's confusing. I know.
People know you know, and your New York entertainment lifestyle, and then also all that you've done in the Christian industry and everything. So anyway, talk about the book, All the Green. It's a beautiful cover. Hold it up for the people.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah,
thank you.
It's gorgeous. It's gorgeous. So I know what inspired you, but I want you to share with the audience what inspired you to write this powerful book.
Well, I mean, it was, sitting down with these celebrities or athletes and performers. I've always, for instance, if I was interviewing a celebrity for a film, I always was more interested in who they were as a person, their story, not so much the persona that they portrayed in the film or in the show. And I studied acting for a long time in MISO, so I was always able to sort of tap into sort of their emotion and connect with them and be very vulnerable and open with them. So when I was able to do that, I started to learn more about them and their struggle and their brokenness. And I saw that there was sort of this common thread across most of the celebrities and the athletes that I met and encountered, that at some point in their life and their career, even if they were at the height of it, they were broken, or they were struggling, or they were depressed, or they were just like me and you, right? We were broken.
Absolutely.
And they leaned on something, and most of the time it was God. But prior to that, it was drugs, alcohol, and everything that the world and success and the money and the fame and Hollywood promised them. If I make all this money and I become famous, I'm going to be happy. That's not true. It's not true at all. And instead, they were depressed and they were broken, just like me and you. So I realized that. And then they said, most of them, when they leaned on their faith or they surrendered their life, I get to give you example after example. Joe Estevez, and he was hooked on all sorts of drugs, and he said, I can't take it anymore. And he finally, it was either like, I don't want to say suicide, but the end, or he was going to have a restart. And when they gave their life to Christ and they made that promise, Mike Lindell, there's so many stories like that. Their lives were transformed. And it happens. And then what happens is they want to share that, and they want to let people know about it. They never forget that moment in life. And it's happened. John Schlitt. I give you so many examples of these celebrities, and they would share that with me. And most of the time they wouldn't, because they're very, poised, and they're the interview. And I would ask them a question about the movie and just talk about them. And they would open up, and they would always say the same thing. Nobody's ever asked me those questions. Nobody ever listened to me, because they were listening and wanted the character to speak about the film and not the person. And I wasn't interested in the movie, because the movie is going to pass in a couple of months. Is how many thousands of films I've reviewed, but their story is going to last forever. And that story will transform lives and hearts, not so much Spider-Man or whatever movie is out, because that's just a money machine. We're talking about the person. So I wanted to get to know the person. They shared all this information with me, and I always built this bond with them because I was open. I'd cry with them. I would weep with them. And we became like, there was this connection. So I knew that God was giving me all this information. It wasn't for me. And I always said, it wasn't that I wanted to sort of tell the story. Or I'm sorry, I didn't want to create their story. I wanted to tell their personal story. So I took that information, and I used to go around trying to explain to people all this. I have all this information. And I realized that God was using me to put into this book, so then I can share their story, because you and I could talk about God all day and about the power of Jesus Christ, and maybe 6 people will listen, maybe 3. But when you have a celebrity telling the story, like Quaid on Monday, people are really inspired, impacted by that. And then I
Mhm.
took my perspective, which I learned from them, and biblical principles, put it into a book and said, instead of buying, I have 20, 30 motivational books that they're still trying to tell me, the secret to life. And I said,
Yes.
it's all in one book, which is right here, which is the Bible. So if I
Yes.
took with the information that they're
Yes.
putting in these 20 books, put it into one book, made it more applicable with stories of my life,
Mhm.
stories of celebrities, this is something you can follow and it's easy to read. And I said, this is what it is. So I said, this is what I'm going to do. So I put it together and
Mhm.
we released it. And it's a great, easy to follow book. Even my
It
wife enjoyed
is.
it, which she never reads or watches my stuff, but she said, this is a really good book. She
Yeah.
cried at the end, but she had one comment that I didn't mention her enough in the book. That was it. So,
Good for her. Good for her.
so that's my long-winded answer to
No,
the
I love the
question.
book. I love the book. Thank you for sending me a copy of it digitally. But one thing I loved about it was some of your personal stories of growing up in Brooklyn and growing up in a Catholic home. But I also like how you then apply at the very end questions. It's almost like a devotional piece at the end of talking about your purpose and where God has you, even in the in between. I liked those chapters of how you broke it down. I don't want to give away too much to the audience because I want them to go pick it up on Amazon. But I also, that some of those pieces were just really kind of struck me. I want you to talk first about your growing up in Brooklyn. Two things that stood out to me that I absolutely love being married to a Catholic boy. I loved how you talked about your asthma attacks that happened right before you
Mm.
had to go to church. And I also enjoyed the this sauce spoon that you would see if you did not go to church. But they're cute stories, but the bigger piece of that is that foundation that your family had of faith that has brought you to where you are, knowing the power of prayer in your life that has brought you to this point for such a time as this.
Mm.
So, could you share a little bit about that part of the book
Oh,
and just how it's brought you to this point?
yeah, we grew up in a Catholic Italian, home and household in Bensonhurst, Brooklyn, which was a low middle class Italian neighborhood. I thought everyone was Italian, and I thought the whole world was Catholic because that's all we knew. And my grandmother was a devout Catholic, went to church every day, had, a place where she sit. Her name was Mary,
Mhm.
married to a Michael. He wasn't so committed to his faith.
Mhm.
He was, but my grandmother was, and he didn't go to church as much. But my mother, from that, really developed a strong foundation of faith, and we had to go to church all the time. I mean, saint days, and there was so many obligations, and she had us in church. So I would always have I have bad asthma, so on Sunday morning I'd have these dramatic asthma attacks, and I couldn't breathe, and I was like, I can't go to church. And she said, if you don't go to church, you don't go outside. No, ma, I can't go outside. I can't breathe. I can't do anything. So when she came home from church, it was a miracle because I was healed. God healed me. And then I said, Ma, I feel better. And she caught on and she said, no, you're not going outside. So over time, I didn't use that excuse, but she was very strict. We had to go to church. And I didn't understand why I had to go. Like, what was she doing? But then I realized over time, like I saw, we go to college, we get involved in the world, and we sort of walk away from faith. But that
Right.
foundation, that burning sensation continuously burns until you
Yeah.
get older and you say, why did I ever stop going to church? So she developed this strong foundation of faith that now I think I even surpassed her a little bit when we talk about religion and faith. She
Yeah.
teaches CCD, but she instilled this foundation of faith that now I carry over to my son. And
Yeah.
like my son, he comes to church with me all the time. And last week we volunteered and I had him volunteer and he liked it. And I'm like, I'm trying to develop that, into him because it's so important to
Mhm.
have that foundation of faith. But that was something that I'm so grateful for because I don't think if my mom and my grandmother didn't instill that, I don't know where I would be. I probably would be in the secular world like I was working in the Entertainment Tonight or some movie company or something, and further away from my goal, my gift, God's plan, and probably unhappy and
Yeah.
unfulfilled.
Yeah. Well, there was something else that really stood out to me as you were writing and progressing your book. And I remember when we met, it was during COVID. I remember us talking about we've got to get our Christmas ornaments out now because let's celebrate life, and let's not this COVID isolation piece really get to us. So going to the book, you talk about missing the olden days, missing the good old days, and during COVID. And here's where I want to go with it, because you talk about that faithful foundation. And if you hadn't had that, what would have happened? But what I'm seeing now is that faithful foundation that we were brought up with, both you and I, post COVID. Do you think our culture is still struggling from the post COVID, knowing that a lot of us have had that faithful foundation, but we've kind of been pushed away by this new world that we're living in, if you will, that you talk about in your book? I see all of these points, and I know that we have just a few minutes left, but I really wanted to kind of dive into that a little bit. What has been your experience now, being in the Catholic Church, being in this culture and society post COVID, and the what are next steps for we as believers in the public square, honestly?
I mean, I think during COVID, I noticed even my videos, people were watching, people were
Mm.
engaged, people were really leaning on Jesus, right? And then after they survived, it was like, okay, let me put him back in the closet. I use the example like Jesus is not the guy you call when you need to move a couch. He's
Absolutely.
someone you need to be in relationship with, and people lean on him when they need, oh, I need him, okay, and then they go to it. So I think during COVID, people were really connected to faith.
Mhm.
And then after COVID, people have sort of walked away or put him back in the box or haven't reached out to him. In the
Right.
Catholic world, what I learned recently, it was not well, during COVID, you didn't have to receive the Eucharist because we weren't able to.
Right.
And
Right.
now people aren't going back to church because they don't view the Eucharist as the body of Christ or the blood of Christ. So people have sort of, what's the point in going to church? I could watch it online, and then sooner you don't go at all. So there's definitely been a hit throughout the Catholic Church and the evangelical and the
Yes.
Protestant. I think society in a whole has really come after anyone that speaks openly about their faith, and forget about speaking about politics, but you speak
Right.
openly about your Catholic faith, your Christian faith, any faith at all, they really
Yes.
come after you. The only faith you could believe in is the faith in society, which is a faith that continuously changes, and that's the work of the enemy. But I think I do see some sort of gleams of hope and sunlight of hope. I see
Yes.
these bigger celebrities coming out and speaking openly about their faith and not being attacked, right away when they speak openly and talk about how the power of Jesus and how they came to their Catholic or Christian faith and how Jesus saved them. So I see that there's something happening in society, but I think as long as we continue to develop this foundation of faith, the presence of Christ, which really comes from the parents, then there's some hope. But when the parents don't go to church, or the parents don't, or they view this faith as just a tradition, that it's something you do and they don't know why, they can't expect the kids to continue to want to be engaged and involved in the church. So a lot of it comes from the household. Yes, the kids will probably walk away from the faith at some point, but like me and you, we had this foundation of faith, and without the foundation of faith, when they get older, there's nothing. It's even
Right.
harder for us to get them back into church. But I think as believers, we need to speak openly about our faith and not wait for holidays or times when there's a tragedy where we could talk about God. We need to be open about our faith every day, regardless of what the repercussions are, because that's what we're called to do. We're called to carry the cross. We don't carry the cross; it gets too heavy. I put it down. Keep your eyes on Jesus. Look forward and keep fighting the good fight. Because once we stop talking about our faith, it's over. I mean, how do we expect the next generation to believe in Jesus Christ if
Mhm.
we're not willing to talk about him?
Absolutely. And that's what I love about your book, because as we are talking about the book today, you talk a lot about the different celebrities that are engaging in their faith in the public square. And like you said, they're not getting attacked as much as they were before, but you see this whole shift movement in the film industry, that you see these actors like Mark Wahlberg, like Stephen Baldwin, like you mentioned Dennis Quaid. There's this shift in the culture in the film industry where they're putting out more Christian type content for the family. So it's like you and I sitting down and saying, okay, how do I have to screen this tonight if my kids or my godkids are sitting here and I don't want them to see this? And it's having that opportunity to be able to put that out there. What has it been like for you, for example, with Mark Wahlberg and interviewing him, talking about his faith? He's been so at the forefront in our culture talking about his faith. What was that kind of like for you? And what kind of hope do we see for next year with Christian television, film, that kind of thing?
Yeah, I mean, he's someone I ran into, and as a kid, people would always say, "Oh, you look like Mark Wahlberg," and I just thought it was kind of funny. And then how God works, I met his brother. I went to a conference. Him and his brother Jim, we became friendly,
Yes,
and I knew
yes,
Mario Lopez. I interviewed him, so I text Mario when I went into the room, "Hey, I'm going to interview him." I always like to do that. So when I walked in, we sort of knew each other, but he didn't know who I
sure,
was, but we sort of
sure.
had this little connection. And I just started talking to him about his journey of faith, and he was a little bit, held back. He didn't open up as much as I would like, but he did say a couple of things, which is in the book, about his journey and how, now I think he thinks a little bit differently about some of the films and the movies he, just
Mm,
to take on. And he's very open about his faith, and I pray that they don't attack him at some point. But I think, for whatever reason, God is really on his side. They have not attacked him about his Catholic faith, and I'm very grateful for that. I think for us too, like, we're now moving more into doing the feature films. We have a team of people that we're working with, and we wanted to start making really high end Catholic. For this one is a Catholic movie about Father Capodanno, who was a chaplain. He was a man's man who died in Vietnam saving people, was
mm,
shot 30 times. And it's not that he just happens to be a Catholic priest. I mean, it's just he's a guy, and it's a fantastic story. We got the rights to the story, we developed the script, and now we're going into contracts now. And what I wanted to do is, in the beginning, I started pitching the story around to a lot of the secular companies and some of the Christian companies too, and most of them said no. Oh no, we're not interested. It's a Catholic priest. And I'm like, you didn't read the script. It's not a Catholic priest. He's a guy who was who saved 30, 40 people in Vietnam, who is a hero, who happened to be a Catholic chaplain. But I realized that in order for us to get these movies done, we need to do them on our own. So we developed a team, and we're putting together this movie, and we're talking a 20, $30 million movie. We're not talking about a movie that I can raise, on Instagram. We're talking
right.
about a high-end movie, because we want to compete with these other secular films that are coming out. And these
Mhm.
faith-based movies, for the most part, most of them
Yes.
are really good, but some of them, just like me, I created thousands of hours of content, and the budgets were so low, and the quality wasn't great. And I
Mhm.
said, no longer will I do that, because there's multiple reasons. We want to glorify God. I want to give God the best quality possible. So
Right.
we want to start making films like that. And the next one I want to do, I really love the story of Danny Thomas. St. Jude is something that's been on my heart for a long time. And I made the promise to just like, in that sense, made that promise that I will tell his story at some point. So now we're working on movies, and this is what we're going to do. So our plan is to have this film come out next year. We're in the process of doing the contracts now. We'll film this movie either in the United States, or they're talking about maybe Thailand, filming this and then doing more high-end films and raising the bar the way The Chosen and raising the bar the way The Sound of Freedom and Cabrini,
Yes.
where we put out high-end Catholic or high-end Christian content, inspirational content, and not relying on the studios and not relying on everyone else to dictate how we should say certain things and how we should portray certain people. We need to do it on our own. And there's enough of us in this community that can get films like this made. If we work together, we stick together, and we keep our eyes on Jesus Christ.
Absolutely. Well, real quick, tell my audience where they can watch you walk in faith, obviously, buy the book and follow you so they can catch your daily sermon updates. I love when you post those. So where can they follow you?
Yeah, I mean, so Walk in Faith TV, there's a website, godsplanproductions.com. YouTube, it's Craig Syracusa, or Walk in Faith. Instagram, Craig Syracuse. I mean, I have so many different platforms that you could watch the show: Net TV,
Mhm.
Boston Catholic. There's several TV stations, and Overcomers TV, Salt Flicks. A lot of people carry my show, and I'm grateful. The book, like I said, All the Green, you could
Great.
get it on Amazon. I think by now it might be Barnes and Noble's, Target. All the other major stores are going to carry it online. But yeah, support the book, and we just launched a tomato sauce company. I mean, we have our hands in so many different projects and opportunities, because the goal is to just use whatever God gives us to glorify Him. Donate the money, just keep raising awareness. And it's, to me, I always say it's like fishing. You cast it out, and your husband loves to fish, so you would know.
Yes.
You don't know
Yes.
what's gonna work, which bait is gonna work. But in the end, as long as the motivation and the goal is Jesus Christ, evangelization,
Yes.
then it doesn't matter to me if it's a book, if it's sauce, if it's a movie, because the goal is all the same: to bring people to Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ.
Absolutely. Well, you said it perfectly, Craig. Thank you so much for joining the All American Book Club. And you know what? I can't wait to be in Brooklyn and try the sauce. So I
Support the
we will
sauce. That's what I say. Support the sauce.
support the
The heavy
sauce. I can't wait. Stay tuned for our next segment. We'll be right back.